Pera, primeiro vamos ver o mob.
Pode matar ele.
Porra.
Hello everyone, this is TheNelston and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the most underappreciated systems in Wynncraft, guilds. This issue is really near and dear to my heart as the current owner of Idiot Co, which is one of the larger guilds on the server. While saying that guilds are bad is a take as cold as the other side of my pillow until the Rothschilds pay the pillow company to magically make both sides almost as hot as me, I wanted to dissect the issues more thoroughly. In my view, it makes no sense after all that guilds in an MMORPG shouldn't take center stage when it comes to group activities. To that end, I will be discussing several broad issues: the messy state of guild wars, the lack of content for lower level players and non-wars in general, and the absence of many quality of life features. It is important to note, however, that I will be explicitly avoiding discussing solutions to these problems as that would take so long as to require an entirely separate video to cover, and I'm not a developer at any rate. Ultimately, I want to answer one simple question: why should we care about guilds in Wynncraft? Let's get right into it. To begin, I'm sure that we all know that guilds on Wynncraft are basically synonymous with warring. Quite literally, the only meaningful difference between playing with and without a guild, apart from diminishing your sanity by reading blue text in chat, is that you can war in a guild. As such, I think it's prudent to start my critique by taking a deep look at why warring in Wynncraft is in such a bad state right now, and the best way to do that is by walking through the steps a new guild has to face to develop. First, and perhaps most glaringly, warring sucks. Yeah, I said it, clicking a tower repeatedly is not fun, and the only reason a vast majority of players who do it enjoy it is because it's the only other endgame thing you can do as a group besides doing raids. However, let's say you somehow get a group of people together who are deranged enough to like warring and form a guild. You then have to deal with the simple yet massive issue that warring is not officially explained at all. That's right, despite arguably being the main purpose of joining a guild, warring and all its corollary systems are not documented anywhere, either in-game or on the website. It'd be like if you told a guy to drive from LA to New York, except the guy is actually a 12-year-old child, has no idea how to operate a motor vehicle, isn't even sure where New York or LA are on a map, and wow, this metaphor is almost as bad as current Guild War documentation. As a result, all Guild War knowledge is essentially passed from person to person like some sort of speaker ritual, and in a system where guilds have to jockey with each other to gain prizes, you can kind of see why the guild territories map is so stale. New guilds literally cannot compete because unless they spend dozens of hours just figuring out the basics or get lucky and find someone willing to take said guild under their wing, they will never be able to accomplish more than just solving some less contested areas. Then, let's say your guild does figure out how to war and properly defend territories. The next issue is that small guilds have to fight with larger ones to take control of areas, and speaking as the owner of a large guild, we fight tooth and nail to protect what we have, because the current guild system literally only rewards holding territories, be it through emerald/tome seeking or season rating leaderboards. Sure, you can gain some season rating by successfully attacking a territory, but the amount you gain for the effort you put in is minuscule compared to just sitting on your ass and AFK stroking on a claim. Without ample rewards for attacking, there is little incentive to do it, and so the map is even more stale because a few large guilds essentially dominate everything. Hey, wait, this is kind of starting to sound like a critique of the American oligarch. Anyways, as such, most guilds basically only attack with the intended goal of holding an area for themselves, and that leads into the next issue. Setting up a claim is incredibly confusing because ecoing, or the process of applying buffs and bonuses to your territories, sucks. I can already hear the avalanche of comments coming in saying, haha, get good, noob. But I think even the most seasoned ecoer would have to agree that the system is extremely confusing for new players and requires a lot of trial and error, which requires time, which is again not something that is particularly abundant when you try to sit on a bigger guild's claim. This ties into what I said earlier about knowledge being hard to gain a lot of as a new guild, but it's particularly relevant to ecoing because the stakes are so high. If you fail an attack on a territory, you can re-queue it in a moment, or at worst, just reset your attack and go again after 10 minutes. In this case, a maximum cost for a failed war is 10 minutes. If you mess up ecoing, you can completely drain your territories of resources in just seconds, killing all defenses and leaving you vulnerable to an attack which can take hours to recover from. Let's say though that you somehow manage to get past all these hurdles and your guild is now the proud owner of some piece of the map, your little kingdom. Now what? Well, you probably won't attack another guild's claim because having to reclaim and fix your economy is a pain for everyone, and you would prefer not to invite the wrath of a horde of pissed off captains. So the best you can do is attack free-for-all zones where nobody really minds not owning. Or you can sit there and do nothing. Warring basically goes so far as setting up a claim and no further. Yes, some players actually do enjoy warring. I guess masochists do exist in real life too, and don't mind doing attacks for fun with no other tangible reward, but that is such a small portion of the player base so as to be a rounding error. I haven't even begun to mention how prohibitively expensive warring can be. Even with mythic prices coming down thanks to loot running changes, it can still cost several stacks to get equipment and consumables good enough to wipe claims with. Morph might suffice for taking down weakly defended areas and pissing people off in TNA, but it's not enough to take down an HQ. We then have to take a step back and revisit something I said earlier, which is that the only meaningful difference between playing with and without a guild is that you can war in a guild. Believe it or not, a lot of people just don't want to war. Even if wars were completely overhauled, even if they become the most objectively fun content in the game, a lot of people like doing other things like raids or loot running. As it stands, guilds do not change how other content can be done in any meaningful manner, and even the instances where it could benefit non-warriors, such as Profession XP territory buffs, require warring to access, which makes it kind of a useless feature if you don't want to war at all. You can argue that guilds aren't exactly worthless for non-warriors, since there are guild houses, many guilds host events, and so on. However, the central thesis here is not that players don't make the best of a neglected system, but rather that there is a dearth of in-game features which significantly alter the gameplay of players who are in guilds versus those who are not. You can host and join events without being in a guild. You can already collaborate with other people in personal houses. And literally everything else that we associate with guilds, outside of warring, is only done the way it is because an analogous system is missing in Wynncraft. I haven't even addressed the similar yet distinct issue that lower level guild content is completely non-existent. It's honestly such a shame that the only real way for low-level players to contribute to whatever guild they're in is to not be low-level. I'm sure that with some creativity, the content team could come up with some way to make low-level guild content, but that's not my job, so I will just move on. This is the least important section of the video, but I still wanted to dedicate some time to talk about how clunky current guild mechanics are, as well as vent some of my frustration with the way that guild stuff is handled on the Wynn team's end. For starters, guild leaders need significantly more control over what members can and can't do. For example, we should have options to be able to toggle whether or not someone can participate in wars to prevent accidental joins, have more individual control over who can access which tier of guild bank, and more. That last point about guild bank access is particularly relevant, because one issue that I have a serious problem with is the official sanctioning of guild bank stealing. There isn't a public guild at this point which hasn't gotten its bank robbed within the past year or so, and people continue to do this with impunity because mods refuse to ban or even warn players for stealing. I understand why it's hard to enforce these rules, and I understand that it's not against the rules to steal from guild bank, as this video so helpfully demonstrates, But I believe that this should be an enforceable ban because it would go a long way to improve trust within the guild community, not to mention that it is not terribly difficult to see why theft of any kind should generally be punishable. If the moderation team insists on refusing to punish blatant abusers, then the least the team can do, in my opinion, is give us access to more guild logs so we can police ourselves and root out imposters among us. There is so much more I can talk about here, but this video is already dragging on way too long, so I can make a follow-up video if you guys want. This all leads me to the final topic of discussion. Why should anyone care about guilds? The obvious answer, which I've stated before, is that a guild system should be one of the most well-developed and important pieces of content in any MMORPG, but I want to tell you a story. I first returned to Wynncraft after a long hiatus in the summer of 2021 when my friends all suddenly decided that being contributing members of society was a waste of time and that grinding on a Minecraft server would be much more enjoyable. We all had a lot of fun at first, and then in a tale as old as time, everyone started to quit one by one until I was the last person left still playing. Without a group of friends to play with, I decided to search for another community to spend time with, and that's when I chanced upon a shout from DoomDeath1313, the original founder and owner of Idiot Co. While I had initially wanted to join a larger and more prestigious guild like the Aquarium or Avicia, I think I even put in a TAQ application at some point, I decided that joining a smaller guild like Idiot Co would be good enough until I was a higher level. What I found after entering was a highly active and very friendly community, dedicated to helping both old and new players alike. Without realizing it, what was initially meant to be a stint of only a few days turned into weeks, then into months, and before I knew it, I ended up here today as the owner of the guild. The reason I stayed and the reason so many other people remain loyal to their guilds, regardless of the size, is because what guilds provide is something that cannot be replicated anywhere else: a sense of community and belonging. These core concepts form some of the key foundations in any online game, particularly those within the MMORPG genre, but what's critical to recognize is that engagement with any game system, such as guilds, is actually a function of two variables: player interest and development effort. Yes, players will only engage with game mechanics which they find interesting or useful, regardless of developer time, but developers must also put in the time to maintain and improve these mechanics for people to find value in them. That is, unless you're playing TF2 and everyone is so thoroughly addicted to the game that even years of no updates does absolutely nothing to bring down player count, but I digress. In essence, what I'm arguing is that while we as a player base have put in more than our fair share of work to keep guilds alive and the scene healthy, it is absolutely undeniable that they are currently in the worst state they've ever been in. This video has been very hard for me to make, because a disruption to the status quo almost inevitably means that my guild will lose benefits. Despite that, I care deeply about this game, and in particular, I have a special love for guilds, because Idiot Co is arguably the only reason I continue to play Wynncraft despite a shallow endgame. As a newcomer to the guild scene, I speak not out of a desire to return to olden glory days, but rather from a dream of what guilds could be. From a practical standpoint, updating guilds is also just a good use of time, because multiplayer mechanics are what I like to call multilateral or generative systems. These are mechanics which, without developer input, can create endless brand new content just by the way players interact with them. As an example, let's say a guild raid leaderboard with seasonal rewards was added. Without a single extra minute of developer time, guilds will start to generate new content, i.e. competing for top spots, which will keep the player base engaged and busy. This stands in contrast to unilateral or proportional content like loot running, which gets stale much quicker than multilateral or generative content because the reward is only proportional to how much effort a single player puts in. For example, if I choose not to loot run, I neither gain nor lose anything, while not doing guild raids might lead to other guilds overtaking mine on the leaderboards, so I have to constantly play and find new ways to improve run efficiency to keep a competitive edge. What's unique about guilds, however, is the potential to generate content which requires not only very little development time, but actually none at all. The more active guilds there are, the more likely it is that people will intermingle with one another, host community events, and generally contribute to a richer MMORPG experience. Some of my fondest memories are from when I spent days just sitting in some city, spending hours talking to guildmates, engaging gameplay which required precisely 0 seconds of development time. To summarize, guilds are a really good investment of development time, perhaps the best investment, as a few dozen hours of developer time could translate to a few hundred or more hours of content time for players. While it is my sincerest desire that this video alone is enough to galvanize the development team into updating guilds tomorrow, I am not as delusional as Ava Simps, and so this is where I reveal that the intended audience of this video is not the developer team, but rather you, the audience, regardless of whether you have a lot of experience with guilds or none at all. The developers often mention how guilds aren't really prioritized because the vast majority of players never even interact with the system, and while I find this argument to be a really bad explanation to justify neglecting updates, it would be prudent for us as a player base to recognize that we have to play the development team's game to make them care. So, let's work together as a community to increase and maintain the pressure on Wynncraft developers to do something. I've laid out most of my primary concerns with guilds as they stand now, and I hope that precisely identifying them here will make it easier for people to speak up. Talk about guilds outside of the cesspool that is guild community, make and upvote suggestions related to guilds, create your own videos or forum posts to complain. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as it keeps the topics of guilds fresh in the developer team's mind and makes it clear that many people want to see guild improvements, whether to make their current experience better or to make the idea of being in a guild more appealing. I hope that this video marks the start of a guild renaissance, because we are very badly in need of one right now. Thank you all for watching. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, drop a like if you liked the video and a dislike if you hated it, subscribe for more content like this, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.